Have you ever talked to your high school counselor, your guidance counselor, and in that conversation, you tell your guidance counselor, here's my goal. This is what I want to be. And this is the school I want to go to, right? And then have that counselor say to you, well, college is pretty expensive. And where you come from, emphasis on the where you come from, maybe we should lower our expectations. Maybe we should look at a manicure job or a cosmetology or maybe a steel worker because we don't want you to be on welfare. Now think about that and imagine that was said to you. How would you feel? What would you think? What would you do? Well, my guest today is Dr. Elizabeth Palacios, and she just said, watch me. All right, let's meet her. Let's meet her. Dr. Palacios is a first-generation student from one of the poorest school districts in San Antonio, Texas. She attended Baylor University, despite this Gordon guidance counselor statement. She went to Baylor, one of the top schools in the in the whole country. She received both her bachelor's and her master's degree from Baylor. She was working in Baylor in student services and professional counseling. It was involved in a number of different programs. She received a grant for which she then started, and I'll let her get into that in more depth, a graduate school community service department. She had 2002, she earned her PhD in social psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. On graduation, she became a faculty member at Baylor. This is drawback to Baylor again, where she taught undergraduate school psychology and educational administration. She became the dean for the school's student development. Now, her passion, and you're going to hear this while she talks, her passion is building supportive academic environments for underserved and underrepresented students. She's now retired from teaching and is in administration, and she is showing corporations. Now she's taken everything she did in the education field, bringing it to corporate America to show them how to create high-performing organizations. So Dr. Palacios, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Thank you. Thank you. What a pleasure to be here with you.
This is going to be fun, folks, because she and I had a long conversation a few weeks ago. Now, Dr. Palacios, share a little bit about your background, how you ended up in San Antonio, and because it was quite a journey that you had.
It was. I was born in San Antonio, but my parents went to Houston and they wanted to get a better life. So we were really middle class at that point. My dad was a body man and my mom was a nurse and she had gone to community college and so gotten that. So we had a good life, except the fact that I had prayed and wanted my dad to be a preacher. And so my prayers were answered. And they both became missionaries. They wanted to go back to San Antonio and go to seminary. Well, all
Mhm.
of a sudden we went from middle class to now we were in getting food stamps and we were getting clothes and secondhand things. So it was a big shock. But my dad kept saying, "Remember, you're the one that prayed for me to be a preacher, so we're going to do this." So it was a totally different life. It was a totally different life. So I did. I was very happy, but yeah, I didn't realize how different life was. I didn't realize how different education was because I came in fifth grade to San Antonio, but I had all my foundation at Houston at very good schools. And so when I was immersed into one of the second poorest district in Texas, uh, I, I just was just really another shocker there.
Yeah,
And so yeah.
I can imagine. So you end up seeing both sides of the equation very quickly. Wow. I think one of the things, one of my dear friends, Sejal Thacker, does a lot of work with unconscious biases. And one of the things that you had told me was, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then you go see this counselor, and the counselor pretty much blows holes through all of that. Again, unconscious bias, where you come from, people sort of label
Um,
you. Is that what happened?
yes, I was a junior and I was getting into my senior year and very excited about just seeing the world. My parents had always said, you know, you can do anything you want. And being with such a good foundation in school, I did very well in my high school. Um, So it was kind of uncanny. I was the first Latina to be the student council president. So I walked in. I thought, lots of confidence. I was already accomplished in my little high school, and I loved it. Walked in, and she said, "Well, here you go, Liz. Here's your advisor slip." And I looked at it. I said, "Well, we haven't talked yet." And she said, "Well, no need. I've already got you set up. You're going to go take all these cosmetology classes, and you're going to be able to have a decent job when you graduate." And I said, "Well, I do hair, and I can even do my hair." I was joking with her, and I said, "Why would I want to be a cosmetologist? That's not my calling. I want to be a lawyer." And she said, "Liz, there's just so many of you people on welfare." And I guess she was talking about Mexican Americans, because in my high school we were 3,000 Mexican Americans. We were
Mhm.
about 98% Mexican American at my high school. And so I thought, wow, she doesn't even know me. This is the first time I've ever talked to her. I've never had guidance to do anything more. So I gave the advisor slip back, and I said, "No, I want to be a lawyer." And she goes, "Liz, you have to go to college." I said, "Well, I know." And she said, "Well, what college do you even want to go to? Have you even talked to anybody about college?" Which I thought we were doing.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, no, my parents said I could go, but I'm going to have to find my way." And she said, "Well, Liz, I really want you to be prepared. I'm doing this for your own good." And it really hit me how she had already decided who I was, and she had already decided what I could do and what I couldn't do. So I looked around her office, and the good Lord plays jokes on us sometimes. I looked
Yes.
around her office, and it was all Baylor posters, and Baylor this and Baylor that. I had not heard of Baylor, even though I was a preacher's daughter. Uh, and so, I just told her, "I'm going to go to Baylor. I'm actually going to go to Baylor." And she looked at me, and she kind of just kind of grimaced, and she goes, "Listen, Liz, even if you could get into Baylor, you would never fit into Baylor." And those were the words that really, I mean, they etched in my heart and soul, because I thought, I don't know what she's saying, but I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
And I did. I applied to Baylor. I had been accepted to other schools, but I said, "Nope, I'm going to go to Baylor." And I was accepted. And the rest of my life, the passion of my life, really began when I set foot on Baylor, because even though it was such a beautiful campus, and I just felt so that's where I was supposed to be, and I
Mhm.
didn't know a soul, that's where it started, where I started navigating things and started realizing, I am different and I'm being treated differently. And what do I do with that?
Exactly. Now, you choose to go to Baylor, which again, you didn't know anything about when you decided to go to Baylor. Private, I don't know if it's Baptist school,
Yes,
mainly white.
predominantly white. That's a
So,
PWI.
so what's it like first generation Hispanic woman in this environment? What was that like?
So you got to remember, it's back in the late 70s, but a lot of folks came up to me and said, "Wow, you speak good English." And I thought, "Yeah, I speak it well." And then
Speak good
they would
English.
say, "What field did you used to pick cotton from?" And at first I was just, I was taken aback, because I thought, where these people have never seen Mexicans, I guess, or Mexican Americans. So I got that a lot. So were you a migrant worker? Did you pick cotton? And finally, I just started saying, "No, well, I picked cotton, but from HEB aisle 13.
Yeah.
They came in bags." And I just started just using humor, because these folks were not mean. They weren't trying to be mean. They were just ignorant, and they had never seen someone like me. And even when I graduated, I was one of 8 Latinas that graduated that year. And that's incredible when you have a large institution like that.
Exactly. It's interesting is their intent is not to be hurtful, but
Right.
again, ignorance isn't they're stupid. It's just that they were unaware of what it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's that dialogue and doing whatever you have to do to start a dialogue, right? Maybe and
Mhm.
I've heard some people say I used humor, some people say I withdrew. but you at least were able to draw them in a little bit.
Yes, because this is our opportunity to educate others, right? And to give them the language they don't have, to give them the experience they've never had. Um, yeah, that's, I mean, and a lot of my students tell me, we're tired of educating other people about us. We're tired of telling people who we are.
Yeah,
We're tired. Yeah.
exactly. It's a it's almost it becomes your life. You have to do that.
Yes,
Now
yes.
you said initially when we started this, you wanted to be a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So got the degree, and then things changed. All of a sudden, you
Yeah.
applied for a grant. What did they tell you when you applied for that grant? What happened?
Well, let me tell you a little bit before.
Okay.
So when I was an undergrad, I met a lot of folks that told me I shouldn't be there, and had met a lot of folks that said, how did I get there? But I had met other folks that believed in me, professors that said, you need to be here. We don't have enough of you. We need to be more diverse. And so I had such a problem navigating because I was first generation. I had such a problem navigating all college and college life and academics and all of these things, right? So um, I met my husband my junior year and our senior year. We got married, but he decided to go from social work to education. And I told him, listen, I'm going to graduate. I will work at Baylor for 1 year. You get your graduation done, get all your courses done, and then we're gone. Okay. That was my commitment. And so I gave him a year. That's where my first job at Baylor was at the graduate school. And that's where I started realizing nobody was coming through our doors that were people of color. There was no graduate uh, students coming in. And so I had the idea of like, well, why not? Why don't we just start a graduate recruitment program? And that's when I applied for the federal grant, the Department of Education. And my dean, readily said, listen, Liz, this is a very hard scholarship to get. If you get, you probably won't get this. Don't be discouraged. We'll just continue, but I'll let you try. Let me try. And I worked for the chemistry department. We worked on it together. I did my research, realized that only 2% of two out of 100 Latinos were actually going to graduate from college. And that was crazy because you have
Yes.
50 that are going to drop out of high school. Then you have another, I think it was like 25 or 20 that would go into college, but maybe, 10 would graduate, and only two were only ever going to graduate with a graduate degree out of 100. And I thought, so I wrote the grant, and lo and behold, we got it. And I got $36,000 for 3 years consecutively. And so we were able to start a program, hire staff, and go recruiting. And that was probably the biggest exciting thing. But I had a lot of I guess, consequences of just from my peers of saying, you shouldn't be doing this. But we started it, and that was the very first graduate minority recruitment program we ever had.
Wow. When we spoke a few weeks ago, and diversity, we didn't use that word back then, right?
Hmm.
It just
Hmm.
wasn't, that didn't exist. But you told me the goal of diversity is to open the gates. That's all. It's to give you an opportunity. Is that right? Is that what you did?
There's a lot of gatekeepers. There's gatekeepers to get in. There's even gatekeepers to get out of high school, right? There's gatekeepers to get into college. There are gatekeepers uh, just to navigate, academics and college life. They're gatekeepers and I say gatekeepers because they make decisions deciding if you're going to be in or out.
Yeah.
And even your colleagues are gatekeepers. Are you going to be in this club? Are you going to be in this? Are you going to be in the in crowd? Are you going to be in the out crowd? And what I realized is that, I need to get my education so I can be at that level to open the gates. And it's not, you don't just open on the gates, but you're helping people come up. I always say, as you rise to in any position, you turn back and you bring others with you. And that's the opening of the gates. And then you support these folks and you make sure that they have the tools that they need. because a lot of times we'll put people in positions that they're not ready for or they're not supported for, and they fail and say, look, see, these people can't do that, or they're not smart enough for this. And
Exactly.
all you do is open up, open the gates and support the folks, make sure that you're bridging them into success.
Exactly. You also told me that equity is different than equal.
Yes. Equity and equality. Equality is equal. It's, everybody is getting the same thing. So if I go to the doctor, I have a cold, he gives me medicine. The person behind me has a broken leg, but he wants to be equal. So he's going to give him cold medicine and thereon and therefore. But equity is more, you give the person what they need. And there are many, many ways of finding out. A lot of people will say, no, that's unfair. I don't want to give that person that advantage. But remember, people are already starting with disadvantages. It
Yes.
could be cultural. It could be so many resources. It could be so many things. We're not all starting at the same place. I mean, I realized that when I went from Houston to San Antonio, we didn't start at the same place. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned, okay, we're going to give you the opportunity, right? I was heavily involved in the University of Washington volleyball program several years ago, women's volleyball, and most of the coaches were men, and the one in Washington was a male. And I asked him, "So what's the issue? Why are there so aren't there more women?" And he said, "Because they didn't get trained. They said you're a good player, you're a woman. Here, go coach. You don't know how to teach. You don't know how to put programs together. You don't know how to put curriculums together, and they fail. So then you jump, just like you said, you jump right back and say, see, we told you they couldn't do it, but you didn't give them the
Yes.
tools. You didn't give them the guidance to get them there. And that's one of the things you did in one of your graduate classes when you're talking to me. This one really struck me in your master's course is we're going to take these students that are unaware and we're going to make them aware. Tell
Mhm.
us how you did that.
Well, it's just part of the experience. So, yes, with books and articles, they had to read, they had to understand. I had to give them the language. We don't use you people like my
Right.
guidance counselor did. We don't assume anything about just looking even at a person. Can I tell what ethnicity you are? I can't. We look at people, we can't always tell, right?
Hmm.
And so what I wanted them to do was really get personal. And I said, find someone that's either a friend or someone familiar with you. I don't want you picking up anyone off the street because that would be very offensive. But find someone to ask them about their story, ask them about their experiences as a person of color. And it could be a person of color, or it could be another religion, it could be whatever. But I want someone different from you that you can hear their story because it's only one person at a time story that changes our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they
Exactly.
came back and they said, wow, I never knew. I knew this person for all these years, but I never knew that he had to go through this or that or whatever. And so it's one of those things where they have to experience the epiphany for them to believe it. I can tell them, but they have to learn it from themselves. Yeah, and from others.
Which we spoke about changing mindset is it's an acceptance is a bottom up thing, right?
Hmm.
It's not,
Hmm.
I was a corporate CEO, right? So he'd say, I want this stuff. Well, innovation and they don't come from the top down.
Mm-mm.
They come from the bottom up. And the earlier we start, the better the results. Share that a
Yes.
little bit.
Well, I feel like, when you start coming from the bottom, I talk a lot about our students and how they've changed. And a lot of our students now with social media has opened up the world. And so they know and they're learning and they're accepting. It's more in our generation. It's like, what are y'all doing? We can't be doing this. And you're not supposed to be, talking to each other. Um, but when it starts from the bottom, it's really people, again, having these realizations that we're the same. We talk a lot about how different we are, but I talk to people around the world, and even as a therapist, even I see, gosh, people around the world are pretty much the same. They have the same, anxieties, or they have a lot of the similar, problems, and this is human nature. But yeah, we can't mandate acceptance. I hate the word tolerance. I tell my students, please don't ever tolerate anything. You
Hmm.
accept it or you decide how to work with it. if you know, but the bottom line is really how do we respect each other as people? How do we then celebrate their differences? How do we not be fearful about, oh my gosh, they're different, they're going to try to change me? No, they want to live their lives. So when people realize that, those are the creative, innovative people who say, guess what? We can do this, and this group of folks and these group of folks might be able to, come together. Um, Even in businesses, I'm telling you what, businesses are the fastest changing because they know where the money is. And they know if we appeal to this group, we're going to get their business. But in the rest of the world, we haven't been able to be flexible enough to be able to say education is not, we don't teach the same thing for everybody. We don't teach the same way for everyone. And
Yep,
so until we get folks at the front to be able to start giving us ideas, they're the ones with the passion and the excitement and hey, this will really work. And this is the change of hearts. But it's
exactly.
not about, yeah, it's just not about tolerating people. It's about really truly knowing them and then working with them. And differences are fine. Don't be afraid of differences. Yeah.
Exactly. You told me the Gen Zers, the young ones,
Yeah.
they're far more accepting. Part of it is the
Oh my
social
goodness.
media, and that had a big thing. And one of the things, because I've talked to some groups like that, and you've talked far more than I have, but one of the things that, and this was a Gen Z person, and she said to me,
Mhm.
you don't have to understand because you're never going to understand, but you can accept. And that's where the magic is. You have to accept what it is that they've been through and what they've done, and how can we become inclusive. And on the business side, it's an absolute. I was a corporate CEO, and
Yeah.
if you aren't bringing in diverse ideas, you're gonna fail. We had one group, Dr. Palacios. They brought me in, and we're talking to them, and the guy said, "We're floundering. We're not getting business in the 35 and under business, right?" And then I said, "Well, what do you perceive that to be?" And he says, "Well." I was shocked when he said this. He said, Frank, I look around my boardroom and all I see is old, fat, bald white guys. We can finish each other's sentences. We went to the same schools. We
Uh-huh.
go to the same party, go to the same
Uh-huh.
church. And I said, you think that's a problem? And he goes, yes, because we we can't relate. And we said we have a lot of young people coming in. We train them and then they split. And he goes, well, what are we doing wrong? What are they doing wrong? You do this now. What are they doing?
They're not at the table. These folks are not at the table. They're not bringing in those ideas. It's called groupthink. When you have the same people around and you hire the same people, you maintain that groupthink. You maintain those assumptions, those values, and you maintain those things that make you collective. But when you diversify the voices and you diversify the ages, you diversify the genders, um, then you have a more creative team. You have a more innovative, you have more just invigorating instead of the
Mm-hmm.
old people trying to figure out what the young people want to do or should do. I always, when I was an administrator, I always included students in any of my committees or groups because I wanted to hear from them. I could think of all the ideas, but if they didn't buy into it, it wasn't going to happen.
Right? Or they see a little different spin on it. Or
You
they,
know,
what if we
yeah,
did it like this?
yes. It's like I never thought of that. That's why I push so hard, especially in PWIs, which is predominantly white institutions. You have to have a diverse faculty. Students have to see themselves up there. You have to have a diverse administration. You cannot just have all white folks up there trying to figure out what the whole institution is when your institution's diverse. You have to be inclusive about, hey, yes, we can look at the same values institutionally, but let's get some other folks to give us some ideas and what's going on out there because then you get tone deaf and you
Right.
start making all these policies, but you're tone deaf. You're not on the same page with your students or your clients or your customers.
Exactly. Exactly. It's almost like I don't want to make a political statement here, but it's almost like in Congress and they're making judgments on women's rights or women's, and there
Yeah.
are no women in the room.
No. And you would think these people would be smart, but no, you can't think for other people because then you are just putting yourself and your own needs and your own thoughts instead of the people that you're supposed to be representing.
Exactly. when we were in our conversation a couple of weeks ago, you also told me this, which I thought was amazing. I want you to share it. You said race is a myth.
Yes. I jokingly would told you last time, it's like I'm gonna have to complete a form and it says race, as I always put other. Race, there is no genetic DNA for it. Race is a social concept. It was
Mhm.
made to control, it was made to define. Um, quite honestly, we developed it here in the States when we wanted our slaves to be able to be owned. And as a country, I say we, this was all of us, I
United
guess, our
States.
heritage. Um, so race is, I mean, you can't, there is no genetic. Now, you have genes for skin color, hair color, and all of these things. Ethnicity is your heritage. So, we were talking about
Mm,
your heritage
correct.
and my heritage. And so that ethnicity is more the culture, the beliefs and the values and your home, historically your home country. But quite frankly, it's just, ethnicity is more accurate than race. Race was developed and created, and it serves no purpose at all, I think, because again, you can't biologically you can't find it in us.
Right.
But we have
Correct.
similarities in our countries, we have similarities in our culture. But yeah, I'm adamantly against saying, yeah, I'm this or I'm that. I mean, as a Latina, I have to be white. I'm not white. I'm not given those privileges. I'm not
Hmm.
accepted in those places. So why must I check the box white, right? So
Exactly. It's why is it necessary? I was in when I started in the high tech world, and they called it race relations back then. It was a long time
hmm
ago, right?
hmm
And they
hmm
said we have to start putting stuff in. And because I'm Italian Sicilian, I could pass for a lot of different things. And so I'm sitting in this meeting. They said, okay, we need a Native American. They look at me and they said, okay, Frank, we're going to mark you down for that because you look like you could be a Native American. You could be Hispanic. You
Right.
could be Middle Eastern. You could be. And I said, why don't we just go out and bring some of those people in?
Yes.
And they
Yeah.
said, oh, what a novel idea. Okay, let's start, let's bring those resources in. Now you're retired from teaching now, and you're working
Yes.
with the Aurora Executive Leaderships. What are you doing with businesses? Explain that.
So I had given a talk some years ago, and they invited me to be part of their organization. This is called Aurora Reach Higher, and they go to corporations and they'll say, look, if you have some women, because this was developed by women and for women,
Mhm.
if you have some women that you'd like to nominate and you want to grow them to become supervisors, managers, vice presidents, to grow them, um, they offer a leadership program and it is amazing. And it goes through all the different types of leadership, but it also talks about self, the imposter syndrome that many of us women have, because I can have a zillion degrees, but if I still don't feel confident in what I can do because people have told me otherwise,
Yes,
then you start wondering. So this amazing organization, again, Aurora Retire, and it's Reach Higher, which I love the concept. Well, they had interviewed me to see if I'd be a good fit to be a guide, to be a teacher. And so we realized, well, I'm an expert in higher ed, but in business, I have a business degree, but I haven't been in a corporation. And so we both kind of started thinking and said, well, maybe it's not a good fit. And then I just asked a question. I said, well, are you putting in um, inclusivity? Are you helping these women that you're training to be supervisors, managers, and vice presidents? Are you helping these women also learn how to nurture other women, especially women of color? And she thought about that. She goes, we really haven't really focused on that.
right,
And so I said, hey, I can help with that. And so we can talk about, bringing in your own ethnicity, your own culture, and bringing in who you are, and not trying to look like everybody else. And so yeah, I had a cohort last year or this past semester, and we loved it. And diversity was something we talked about. But what I love now is they've come up now with they're going to be doing a corporation from Latin America. They're going to be bringing in now men of color. They're going to be talking more about this. That's not just because of me, but if I have a little spark, if I can
right.
just say a little thing, kind of like what you said, bring them in. and they're taking off with it. They're amazing. So we're just teaching these women to bring themselves, and men and women of color, men of color. So uh, this is a way to grow executives in within the corporation. And people always say we can't find good people. We can't find
No,
women of
that's
color. We
not.
can't find anybody who's qualified. I've heard that a zillion times. I can't
Yes,
hire a faculty member. There's nobody out there. They're here, and
yes,
we're
they are.
training, we're supporting, and they're becoming. They have some really great success stories.
I interviewed Dr. Edward Hess, and I use him a lot. He's for the Darden School of Virginia, um,
Ah, yes,
and he's a futurist. And he said to me, he said, Frank, 65% of the children entering kindergarten today are going to work in a career that doesn't exist.
that's exactly right.
And then he said, and the role of manager is going to go away. And I said, all right, explain that. And he says, it's enabler and facilitator. And that's what you're doing with these people. You're enabling them to bring others along and to facilitate getting things done. The day of the manager pounding on the desk and yelling, which never worked anyway,
No.
that's over.
Yes. And I probably am biased, but I would just say women tend to lead differently. We're a
Oh,
lot more
yes.
collaborative. We're a lot
Yes.
more inclusive. Not everybody, because I know in my business experience, in my business school, I was a little junior then, and I from San Antonio then, I was donning, bright reds and fuchsia and big earrings, and I was my Latina self. And my one of my professors said, Liz, you better tone it down. If you're going to be a serious businesswoman, you need to tie your hair back. You need to wear that navy and the dark suits. And in other words, I heard I need to be more like a man, right? I need to look
Yes.
more like a man. And what I my passion is saying, no, you don't change who you are. You bring who you are and make that corporation or that organization or whatever institution better because of
Mhm.
you. No one can be another Frank Zaccari. So, you bring who you truly are, and don't change. Now, there's cultures and businesses and stuff, but what I tell the women in my cohort is, you bring and you celebrate who you are, you enhance. They're better because of you.
Exactly. It's one of the books I wrote. I wanted to show the commonality, right? And so
Hmm.
I had a woman. I didn't know anybody from the Ukraine, so but I know a number of people from Poland, a country right next door.
Mm,
So I got
hmm.
her to write traditions and cultures, and I got a woman from Persia to do it, and a woman from India, and they
Mm.
wrote all their stuff. And then when you narrow it all down, everybody wants the same thing. I want to be seen.
Yeah.
I want to be heard. I
Yes.
want opportunity. I want to be in a safe community. Everybody. It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Right?
We all want the same thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if we work together, we have that opportunity to have that same thing. It's not an us versus them. It's not they're not taking your place at the table.
No. And we can't get people to understand that it takes nothing to be kind. It
Yes.
takes nothing to be respectful and to be valuing of other people. It costs nothing. And when we start grouping people and saying they're taking your money, they're taking your jobs, they're taking your whatever it is, it's easy for us to hate groups. But when you start learning and knowing persons individually, it's a lot harder to you find someone who's an exception to your rule. We get this perception and we start seeing the world through these lenses. And when we find someone who doesn't fit, you're either going to throw it out or you're going to change your perception. And that's what we're all about, changing the world one person at a time.
Exactly. Well, after this talk, there's a lot of people going to want to get a hold of you. So how do they do that?
Well, my let's see, excuse me, my email. Well, I have several, so I'm trying to think of what's the best way. But for right now, I just retired. So Liz underscore Palacios at Baylor.edu. And after working at Baylor for 40 years, it's hard to
Do not
so
do
I
not
will be
give that
having
one.
you.
But we will have everything what we know of that how to get a hold of Dr. Palacios when we put when this thing
Yes.
goes public. So there'll be ways to find you and people to engage and interact with you. One of the things you're going to find with Dr. Palacios, number one, she responds very, very quickly, very quickly. And you just heard how entertaining she is and how aware she is, and that the ideas that she has are just amazing. So we're just about out of time here. I want to thank you again. Thank you so much for coming in and
Oh,
showing
I've
that you
enjoyed it.
can opening the gates is just giving an opportunity. It's not a promise and it's not a guarantee. It's an opportunity. Now you can see this show on my podcast, which is called Life Altering Events. It'll be on my YouTube channel, which is called Frank Zaccari. Also be on Parade Deck, and I will send links to Dr. Palacios, and she will post them in her world all over the place. If you use the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Let me leave you with this. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. Today, Dr. Palacios showed us where many, many of those rocks are. Join us again next week for another Life Altering Events. Again, thank you.
Thank you.